Hi everyone, I want to thank the Congress Arte y Comunidad to this opportunity to present this discussion that's been so close to my initial development of my PhD thesis. This is an initial debate that I've been delving into regarding the relation between the experience of how various axes of differentiation and the musical experience can intertwine. And as it is split by now, experience is a word that is important for my research. Even though this will be a short communication, I hope I can open a little bit about this debate regarding music, disability, and gender. As I said before, the focus on experience will be of the utmost importance to comprehend how different difference markers can change the experience of music in so many social cultural contexts. My research begins with the ratings of important authors from different fields of knowledge and starting to think about how the experience written by them cannot be understood as independent objects with distinct properties. I can only understand the relations of power, the distinction processes, and the nature of various different phenomena when I perceive the intersectionality that is present in the everyday experience. Because of this, I could not understand the musical experience without first comprehending how process of how the normal is constituted, and so it was of the utmost importance to comprehend how disability, gender, and music can relate. To make this approach possible, I had to choose some optics to observe the studies of disability, gender, and music because these fields have, I don't know even how to say it, they have so many works, they have so many perspectives, and so what is important to understand disability as an example by the social model as proposed by Oliver and Davis, who advocates for a study of disability by its relation with its social context more than its biological characteristics. In the gender studies, I align myself with the proposals of Butler in the perspective of gender as a performance and as a way of acting with power, and of the proposition of Scott uh, of gender as a historical category. With the music studies, I understand that the musical process can only be understood as a collective practice, and music cannot be understood outside of this dimension. So, considering that this is a initial research on the field of sociology, that is where my PhD program is situated, I believe that understanding the relation of these concepts, of these experience, is of the utmost importance to making a research about the intersectionality of these topics and experiences. With this in mind, I'll talk a little bit about how the process in which I started to relate these fields of knowledge into my work, explaining how I've made the initial research that inspired what I'm working with right now. With this slide, I tried to present how I've made the bibliographical research in the Brazilian database Scielo alongside the Latin databases LILACS and Redalyc with the same key concepts on Google Scholar. The concepts in Portuguese, Spanish, and English were translations of the same terms: music, disability, and gender. I tried to make the most possible changes between them and connecting, like music and disability, music and gender, music, disability and gender, gender, disability and music, to gather most of the work that I could find made with these fields of knowledges and the relationship between them. I also included relevant sources that were cited in multiple articles indexed with these databases, so I could acknowledge what were the most famous authors, the most cited authors that I needed to read and understand to make this research, to make this debate possible. And now I'll try to present a brief part of the readings that appeared on this research. In the results of these studies, I found a lack of studies around these three topics simultaneously. Gender studies are being briefly evoked in works debating their relationship between music and disability. Aura found a very brief musical example by an author who deepens the debate between gender studies and disability studies, in this case being the Rosemary Garland Thompson Hour. So what I found was mainly there is a vast bibliography relating gender studies and disability studies, in which there is a debate that men with disability are engendered. What do I mean by this? That they feel the process of being gendered, and with this being at a social disadvantage, with being destituted from its man place, with its manpower, with its privileges, and a deep debate of how the care work is profoundly experienced in the context of the disability. So it was a very important reading to understand how these experience can relate in the everyday life. And I think it is a great work, great intersection to understand how can you comprehend different axes of differentiation in the everyday life, connecting and changing and modifying its structures, and how individuals have an agency to try and change these structures, but how the cultural expectations of these people modify its possibilities in the everyday life. It was very much, I don't know, it was inspiring to read these works and try to debate this in the musical context. Gender in music, too, I found a vast bibliography in the Brazilian scholarship, because in the Brazilian academics, because there is a possible relation of the expectations of roles of men and women in the music, when there is so many men that are composers and so many women that are expected to just be the instrumentists, the who perform the performers, and the relationship in which men are determined to have the intellectual work and women as this place of emotional expression, and how these experiences define the expectations of the roles in the musical context. It was in the same way very inspiring to comprehend these different dimensions and these interaction of these dimensions. And the disability in music, I found there is a very unique way of perceiving persons with disability in the musical context, in which a person with disability is perceived as an exception. In this exception, this person cannot be and live and play and experience music in a perceived normal way. This is debated in which this person can only live through the narrative in which it is an exception that conquered all the barriers that was put into them and become heroes, become someone who is even not a human because of this, becomes someone who exceeds this, or someone who has its work diminished because exactly in this case it is not a human, it is not a person. So there is this complicated and very specific way of experiencing music, and I found this a great reflection about how these different axes of differentiations can influence the perspective and the experience and the expectations of people in the musical context. I believe that these experiences are important to understand the musical context because, as Christopher Small said, the question that is most useful to us is not what is the meaning of this musical work. No, the useful question is what does it mean when this performance takes place at this time, in this place, with these people taking part. And considering this disadvantage part, this disadvantage axis that comes with the differentiation and of constructing and making a normal and a different and an other in this process is very important to the musical research. And with this, I try to make a rapid discussion of these topics on the context of integrating the musical research, the gender studies research, and the disability studies research. As I said before, gender and disability are perceived as an exception. There is a need as a cultural complex of constituting a normal music experience. And these people take place and take part in constituting this normal as making another, making someone that isn't a part. And as I said before, there is a very important piece of making disability as an engendering process on the experience of these people. There, in the musical context, with these axes, there is a new way of perceiving intersectionality, and I defend the need to hear and to explore into participant observations the lives of these people, of the ones that are marked by this differentiation process. And with this, I try to make a quick conclusion to this brief reflection. I defend that there is new creative ways of comprehending experience. And when we try to understand these different experiences on a context like the musical context, I believe that because of the emotion, because of the roles, because of the professionalization, there is something very unique to be observed, and comprehending these different axes of differentiations can lead to new theories and understanding a little bit better how we shape our culture into different forms in the everyday life in ways that we couldn't imagine in a first moment. And I defend the need for ethnographic research and for participant observation to try and develop new knowledge about these contexts and about these people.